All right, welcome to the Advanced Developer track on this Thursday morning and the Building Force.com apps with Adobe Flex and AIR session. As you can see, we're a team of 3 people here trying to figure out how to make this technology work to deliver this session to you. I'm sure we will be successful momentarily. Before we get started, I'd like you to review our safe harbor statement. I'm pretty sure that you have seen it many, many times by now. But as you know, we're a publicly traded company, and for that reason, we have to show you the safe harbor statement. If you want to review it in more detail, it's on our investor website also at www.salesforce.com/investor. My name is Marcus Spahn. I'm a Director of Product Management with Salesforce.com, responsible for our current Force.com offline edition and also for this new exciting product that we built together with Adobe. And let me just quickly walk you through the agenda before we get started here. First of all, I want to take a quick moment and review our cloud architecture again, something that you're probably pretty familiar with, but I just want to kind of refresh your memory, if you will. Then we're going to look at the Adobe Flash platform. And obviously, you know, the product that we're going to talk about here today, Adobe Flash Builder for Force.com, is a combination of those 2 platforms. Then we're going to go right into the meat of it and look at Adobe Flash Builder for Force.com, see how we combine those 2 platforms and what we put together for you. We actually spice it up with a lot of demos by James and by Nick. And then we're going to look into typical application patterns, so basically what you can build with this new platform. And then we're going to finish it up with a round of Q&A. So hopefully at the very end we should have about 10 minutes left if everything goes to plan. And I would ask you to hold your questions until we reach that point in the presentation. So the Salesforce.com cloud architecture, you have seen Mark, obviously our CEO, talk about this today in the keynote again. The cloud architecture has basically 3 main pillars, if you will. The Force.com cloud infrastructure that gives you things like our reliability, our multi-tenant kernel, and then on top of that cloud infrastructure, we have our cloud platform, our Force.com cloud platform that gives you services like, for example, our database, a programmable user interface, workflow, all these good things that you don't really have to worry about. You can just basically use them and build your applications. And then on top of that, obviously, we have Salesforce.com CRM, the Sales Cloud, and we just announced the Sales Cloud 2 today, the Service Cloud and the Service Cloud 2, and the Custom Cloud. This presentation actually was put together a little bit beforehand in the conference, so you don't see the collaboration cloud in here, but that's obviously a new dimension that we launched yesterday with the arrival of Chatter, the application, and then also Chatter as the collaboration platform. One thing that is not really in those picklets here is if you look into, you know, there's a lot of partners that are actually also here at Dreamforce, if you go down into the exhibition hall, that are actually using Adobe Flash and Adobe Flex technology in conjunction with Force.com. Right, so as some of you may actually be well aware of, we had some toolkits out there that are available as open source on our developer.force.com website. There's a toolkit for Adobe Flex out there that you can basically use to have the Force.com API available natively in your Flex application. Then there was also a AIR toolkit out there that allowed you to do some pretty basic caching of queries that you would run against our API. And then once you lost your connectivity, you actually had the results of those queries still available. But I mean, anyway, you see actually that Flex and AIR is actually no new technology at Salesforce.com. It has been used for quite some time now. But before we actually talk a little bit more about what we can do with Flex and AIR in conjunction with Force.com, I'd like to welcome James Ward from Adobe Systems. And James is going to walk you through the Adobe Flash platform.
Great. All right. Thanks, Marcus. So welcome. Thanks for coming today. Is this mic working? Yep. Okay. Awesome. So I'm James Ward. I'm an evangelist for Flex at Adobe. So how many people here have ever used Flash in their browser, like watched a YouTube video, you know, anything like that? Okay. Fantastic. That's great. So what we're doing with Salesforce here is we're building a platform to be able to use Flash technology to then run our enterprise applications with. So I want to walk through the different parts of this platform. Before I do that, I want to go into what is a rich internet application. You know, you've probably heard the buzzword rich internet application. What does that really mean? So if we look back at the transitions that we've been through in software, and we put these on a chart, and we say our x-axis is the client capabilities from full to limited, and then the y-axis is our ease of deployment from hard to easy, and we look at how software is transitioned, what we see is that we've been through a few transitions. From mainframe, where we're very limited in client capabilities, and also very hard to deploy. First major transition was to client-server architectures, where now we're able to have much fuller client capabilities. Our applications, they can do much more with the UI. They can do much more in how they talk from the UI back to our back-end systems. So that's great. Next major transition, because of the limitations and the difficulties with deployment around client-server, is to web applications. So now anyone with a web browser can interact with our software. But the challenge there is that we took a huge step backwards in terms of our client capabilities. So the next major transition in software is to rich internet applications and cloud computing, where we want to be high on both scales. We want to have the full client capabilities that we have with client-server. We also want the ease of deployment that we have with web applications. So this is really where software is heading. This is why the partnership between Adobe and Salesforce is great, because we really get both of those axes. We get high on both of those axes. We get the full client capabilities with Flex and Flash, and we get the ease of deployment with the cloud. So let me dive into a little more details about what the Flash platform actually is. So the Flash platform has a lot of different pieces. The big idea here is to be able to run these rich internet applications on any device, whether you're in the web browser, whether you're on the desktop, whether you're on mobile devices. And so we actually use the Flash technology as the foundation for doing that. So if you're in the browser, Flash Player, the same Flash Player that you use to watch YouTube with, we use to run applications. If you're on the desktop, we have a technology called Adobe AIR that we leverage to be able to have natively installed desktop applications. So now in order to build applications for these runtimes, we have a set of developer tools. So Flex is the name of our core developer tooling. It's an open source it's an open source SDK, and it has all the building blocks that you need to build applications that run on those different places where Flash lives. So then we also have professional tooling based on Eclipse called Flash Builder that allows developers to easily use the Flex SDK to build applications for those runtimes. So that's a quick overview of the Flash platform. And before I jump into more details on that and what Flex is, one second here. What I want to show is an application called Tour-Day Flex. So Tour-Day Flex is a great way for you after today to go home and say, all right, what can I do with Flex? What are the different components that I can use to build applications? And so we created this application called Tour-Day Flex, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that today. You can get this at flex.org/tour. And so this is a list of components that are provided in the Flex SDK, and just the out-of-the-box Flex SDK, as well as by third parties. And so what we're seeing here is we can go in and see, all right, in the out-of-the-box Flex SDK, here's some different controls that we get. We get advanced data grid controls. We can use these controls in the browser, in a Flex application, or on the desktop. And you'll see some of these in a little bit with our other demos. So there's a lot of different controls that just come out of the box. There's also examples in here for how you build desktop applications with AIR. Interesting. We okay? Is that still working? Strange. Fireworks in our microphones. It's always fun. I guess if I don't move 1 inch, we'll be okay. Okay, so there's examples in here for how we connect to Twitter, how we connect to Flickr, how we connect to all these different services out in the cloud. There's also a lot of examples in here for how we do rich data visualization. So if you want to build a heat map that'll show information on a map in real time, who's actually visiting your website or where your leads are coming from, we can actually use the IBM real-time dashboard to receive information. So if you wanted to use this component in your Flex application, you just add a few lines of code, and you can find the code in the other tab up there. And this is now actually receiving in real time some information about who is, in this case, doing samples in Tour to Flex based on their IP address. Lots of different examples in here for data visualization. Let me show you some other ones. So there's some great mapping APIs in here as well. Google's recently released some Flex controls to do 3D mapping. So what we can do is, let's say we want to do an animated fly to in a 3D map. We can just write a few lines of Flex code, and now you can have that inside of your Flex application, either in the browser or on the desktop. So those are some great controls. There's tons more in there. I want to show you my personal favorite, though. There's this guy named Doug McEwen. He's an open source developer, builds a lot of Flex components and just puts them on his blog. He created this one that I love. It's called the physics form. And so the physics form, what he was trying to do is embrace some of the ideals of rich inner applications and conveying feedback to users. So in this form, when the user does something wrong, we didn't want to just show the typical, error message. You didn't put in your name correctly, or the username and password weren't correct. So what he did was he wanted to create a better visual way to illustrate to the user that they screwed up when they entered their information wrong. So that was his way of visualizing that information to the end user. Definitely one of the most valuable, useful Flex components out there. Definitely hope to see that in everyone's Salesforce applications. I think we could actually get that into Stratus, right? That's coming in the next version. Yeah, okay, great.
We have yet to figure out what we do when you actually successfully log on.
That's right. I think they jump up and down. Yeah. Okay, so that's Tour de Flex. Great resource to continue learning about what Flex can do, what the Flash platform is, and that's at flex.org/tour. So now let's talk a little bit about how Flex actually works. And this part gets a little bit geeky, but I want to make sure this is the developer track. I want to make sure that we get into some of the details for what's really going on in Flex. So what happens in Flex is developers write code, and you can use the visual designer and Flash Builder to create UIs. You can wire those up to services. All very easy, but really what you're doing is assembling components together through object-oriented, unit-testable code. And then what happens is you run that code through the Flex compiler, and that creates a Swift file. So that Swift file is the actual application. So that's the client side of your application. You would then put that Swift file up onto Force.com servers. You would put that on your own servers. And then a user would visit your website. That Swift file would download to the client, just like you do when you are watching a YouTube video. Swift file is downloading to your machine and then executing client side. So what's now happening, that application executes client side, and it needs to communicate via some way back to the server. So this is kind of like the client-server architecture that we used to have, except for we're not going to talk directly to our database like we did in the old days with client-server. What we're going to do is talk to a web services layer in our application. So in the case of what we're doing with Force.com and Salesforce, that web services layer is provided by Salesforce, provides us a way to get to our Salesforce data. So this is great. We can build these rich inner applications on top of any backend. We can integrate them easily with Salesforce, and very exciting stuff that we're doing there. For AIR applications, very similar. Developers write code. They assemble these components together. They build a UI. They build a really great UI. And then we compile it down into an application just like we did for the browser deployment model. But you also package this application now into a .air file. So .air file is the installer that you then use to distribute to your users so that they can install the AIR application as a local desktop application. So very similar process here. They get that application running client side, and then because we're running as a desktop application, we get out of some of the limitations of the browser. So we get access to the native file system. We get access to native drag and drop APIs, a local SQL database. All those things now we can do because we're outside of the browser. We're installed on the user's machine. So that's how AIR works and Flex works. So I want to actually hand it back to Marcus now and talk about now what are we doing more specifically with Flex and Salesforce combined.
Thanks a lot, James. It was truly a great overview of the Flash platform. So Adobe Flash Builder for Force.com, as you can tell from this slide, obviously is about how we can actually leverage the best of both of those platforms and combine it into a single product. And so I know, of course, you're not very interested in slides, so we will actually, as quickly as we human possibly can, dive into the code and actually show you the product as it actually is already available. But before we do that, let me just give you, let me paint a very high-level picture of what Adobe Flash Builder for Force.com is. Just simply because if you look at the name, you would actually think that all we did is build another development tool, but we actually went a little further than that and actually built a completely new development framework. And so if you look at the top layer, you will see that the kind of no-brainer when we did this integration was, of course, the tooling integration from a perspective that both Flash Builder as well as the Force.com IDE are both based on Eclipse. So it's very easy for you to basically install both of those perspectives into your Eclipse environment. It doesn't really require a lot of integration, if you will, but the benefit for you as a developer is you can switch to the Force.com IDE perspective. You can do all your backend development, like Apex coding. You can interact with the metadata API, with the API. You can browse Salesforce.com. And then once you're done there and you want to do your front-end development, you can switch over to the Flash Builder perspective and basically introspect what you have done and then start building UIs, right? Once you're in there, of course, if you look at Flash Builder out of the box today, there isn't really a lot of, as it comes plain vanilla, there isn't really a lot of introspectability into Force.com. So that's the first thing that we wanted to make sure you could do as a developer. So we actually added this Force.com discovery and introspection. We're going to show you a demo of that. And so what that allows you to do is basically suck everything that you have in Salesforce.com, all your objects, all your fields, into Flash Builder, and then start building with that. And then from a UI components perspective, obviously we thought that a lot of you would want to build applications that look and feel and behave like Salesforce.com. And so sometimes that's a little bit difficult. If you look at Flex technology and HTML, looks slightly different. But so we actually contributed a whole lot of UI components into the platform, so you can actually very easily build Salesforce.com look and feel like applications, and we will actually show you some of those UI components as well. Then, still from the development side, but also from the runtime side, one of the bad things, if you will, about offline and online applications, or applications that can work both in connected and disconnected mode, is that you always have to worry about, so am I online, am I offline now? What do I do if I'm online? What am I doing if I'm offline? So you will find, if you write a traditional online and offline application, there's a lot of if-then-else in your code. And you have to worry about, okay, if I'm online, then I've got to serialize everything into an S object and talk to the web services API on the Force.com platform. And if I'm offline, well, then I want to use the local AIR database, but that's SQLite, so that doesn't know anything about S objects, and you have to account for all of this. But so what we put into the platform here, or into the framework, is Adobe's Lifecycle product. And we changed that around a little bit, and I think that's actually also an important detail to understand, that this new framework that we built is not just simply Salesforce.com adopting Adobe's technology as is. It was actually a joint engineering team of both companies that built this platform for you. But so what we did for the data management service, we actually took Lifecycle and actually changed a little bit around and put a little bit more of the logic client side. And we created what we call data management services. And from a developer's perspective, that's great news, because when you develop as you develop your app, what it gives you is basically all the CRUD capabilities, and it abstracts the online versus offline experience. So if you need to, let's say, create an account or create an opportunity or create any object in your app, you would actually talk to the data management service, and the data management service knows, oh, I'm currently online, so I'll talk through the Force.com data services adapter to the API. And if it's offline, it knows, okay, I got to talk through my offline adapter to the local database. And you don't really have to worry about online versus offline. You can write queries against the data management service. It'll just work whether you're connected or disconnected. So it basically takes completely the guessing out of building your offline or online applications. And then on the Force.com side, of course, we're using proven technology like our web services API. I think we released, version 18 or 17 now, very proven. We process, I think, is 1.8 billion API transactions every month. About 55% of our traffic, in fact, comes through the API. And then if you're familiar with our current offline tool, we have an admin console that allows you to actually define the bucket of data that you would want to take into an offline application that is running on your desktop. So we're going to use that in this framework as well. How does it work? Well, I mean, one of the great things, I talked about the developer's experience a little bit. So you have the Force.com IDE. You can go in there or into that perspective. You can configure your application metadata. You can create new objects, all this kind of stuff. And then you would switch over to the the Flash perspective and build your rich internet application. And the nice thing about it, and James basically talked a bit about how you can deploy Flex app either in the Flash player online, or you can actually deploy them on the desktop in AIR. And the great news here is that you don't have to pick between those two. You can actually build an application on Adobe Flash Builder for Force.com, and then once you're done, you can write it once and deploy it in either scenario, right? So if you, for example, start out with a rich CRM application, let's say a heat map or something like that you build initially to put into a Visualforce page and have it in the app, and then you say, well, wouldn't it be nice if I actually had a desktop application that pretty much gives me the same functionality? It's basically seamless for you to take that same code given that it was written on the same framework, and run it on the desktop without really changing a whole lot. We actually did have a demo here. You probably saw us scramble a little bit with the technology here, and I think you also probably heard in the keynote that Salesforce is a very agile company. So agile as we are, we actually changed things a little bit around, and we will actually walk through this demo a little bit later on. So let me talk about the developer benefits of this platform, and I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible so that we can actually get to see the product. But of course, one benefit is you have one single Eclipse-based IDE, right? So there's one development tool that you would open. You do your backend and your front-end development in there. If you have ever used Flash Builder, it's very powerful. There's a source view that allows you to code MXML or ActionScript, but you can also switch to a design view that gives you a more visual idea of what it actually is that you're building. I talked about the pre-built UI components that we're going to show you that give you the Salesforce look and feel out of the box. Pre-built data management and synchronization. We will actually also walk you through that demo and show you what you actually all get for free with this framework and what you don't have to worry about. And then I talked about the develop once and deploy either in the browser. And of course, if you think about if I'm a Flash developer, the big news in here for me is I can now take the Force.com development speed, which is, as you know, 5 times faster than any other platform in the industry, and I can take it now to the desktop or into the Flex world, right? Because I don't have to worry about a database or an app server or something else in the end. I just basically write my application on Force.com, and now I can write a seamless, rich user interface on this new technology. There's basically 3 use cases that we see where you would want to use Adobe Flash Builder for Force.com. The first one we kind of talked about already. So for example, for the Sales Cloud or the Service Cloud. So if you are an existing Salesforce customer, a lot of people already use Flex and Flash today to basically provide a richer user experience within the application. And that's obviously a use case that we enable also. So you will be able to write those Visual Force extensions, or if you will, Flash applications that you would run within the application inside a Visual Force page. The second one is something that we also see quite often, which is you build a complete custom app. And it's running on Force.com in the backend, but you write a complete user interface in Flash technology. Like, for example, this example here, this is Promethean. I think this was built by Model Metrics, a partner of ours. And basically, it's a very rich user interface where you can drag and drop on the storefront, and you can actually minimize and maximize and zoom in. So it's basically, you know, a very rich user interface for an e-commerce solution, but all the backend is Force.com, and it runs in the cloud. And then the third use case, and we talked about this a little bit already also, is the use case of occasionally connected applications. So that would be more the classic offline use case where you would have maybe a sales rep or a service rep that's out there in the field. You cannot always guarantee that this person has connectivity to the internet. And so you basically need to allow those people to work with Salesforce and on Salesforce or on a Force.com application, actually, even when the internet is not available. All right, and well, with no further ado, let me introduce you to Nick Simha. And Nick and I will actually walk you through the demo and show you Flash Builder for Force.com.
Okay, thanks, Marcus. Let me switch over the network first and switch my display over. This is.
I know we have to switch down there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
All right, give us just a second. Technology is. All right.
Let's see.
All right, while Nick is getting set up here, maybe we want to do a quick round of Q&A in the beginning. What do you say, Nick?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, the gentleman up here.
What's the difference between Adobe CS4 Flash Builder, the Flash Builder plugin for Eclipse, the Flex IDE, and then Flash Cabinets?
That sounds like a question for James.
So I'm going to have to talk into your mic. So there's Flash CS4 is the typical timeline-based development tool, which is the traditional way that people have created Flash content. Flex Builder was a product. Flex Builder 3 is our current product for doing Flex development, which is the developer tool to create Flash content. And then to confuse everyone, we renamed Flex Builder in the next version to Flash Builder 4. So Flex Builder 3 is being renamed in the next version to Flash Builder 4. So Flex Builder, Flash Builder, same thing, just same product, new version, different name. And then Flash Catalyst is a new tool that we're working on to do more designer-oriented development, rapid application development, type of UI prototyping, that sort of thing. Cool. And we're up with Nick. So.
Okay, thanks. So I'm back. I'm online out here. So the demo that we want to show you is how to build a Stratus application, which has got an offline and online usage. The application is something that you may use for inventory management. You can think about somebody going around a warehouse taking track of inventory. They may be in a spotty Wi-Fi connection, so they need that kind of offline capability out there. So we'll walk you through what you need to do on the Salesforce side and highlight some of the code that is required on the Stratus side to build an application like that.
Right. And one thing that I'd like to mention also is because Nick mentioned it, Stratus. You will actually often hear this product also referred to as Stratus. I'm not sure if you got a chance. There's, let's see, I got my bearings. I think this way is the Stratus Cafe, sponsored by Adobe.
This way, yes.
Actually, this way, okay. Make sure to check it out after this session. But Stratus was just simply the code name of this product.
Right.
During development, where you still actually see us use it, and you will actually also in the code see.
Yeah, code, you'll see references to that. So any application that you build on Stratus will depend on some database objects you have on Force.com. And in our case, it is a simple custom object called merchandise. And you'll see an example of that out here. We got a custom object with about 4 or 5 custom fields. And these custom fields are of different types. You know, we got a currency type, we got a checkbox, we got a drop-down list, and so forth. Now, one of the things that you may know about Salesforce is when you generate the custom object, the metadata that is captured during the generation of the custom object is used to build the UI. So the UI has a lot of built-in capability. For example, I can go in and do like an inline edit out here and pick things from this drop-down box out there, from the pick list out there. So one of the things we'll be showing you is how you bring the same kind of experience or same kind of functionality into your Flash application without any coding on your part. So once you have the custom object, the other thing you need to do is to expose this object to your offline application or to your Flex application. And for that, there are 2 pieces of configuration needed. One is the user that needs to access this needs to have offline access checked in their personal information. So you see that it is an offline user. So that enables the individual user to access the offline capability of the product. The second thing is an org-wide setting that you need to do. Basically, what you need to tell Salesforce is this is the bucket of data that needs to get transferred between the Salesforce org and the offline client. And if you've done mobile or any other kind of offline thing, the steps is going to be very similar because we are leveraging the same basic functionality there. So let me go ahead and configure that. I'm going to go into Desktop Admin, click on Offline Briefcase, and I'll create a new configuration. I'll just call it DF Demo, make it active. And now I can either assign individual users or I can give everybody with a certain profile access to this configuration. So I'm just going to give all sysadmins access to this profile out here. Next thing I'm going to do is to add the set of data, the bucket of data that can get transferred over. I go in out here and choose the custom object called merchandise. And you'll notice that I can filter this further. I mean, I can restrict the amount of data that actually gets transferred over. And you may want to do this, you know, to limit the size of the data, or maybe for the profile of the person that will be accessing it, may only need a subset of the data. So I'm just going to have no limit out here and click Done. That's all you need to do on the Salesforce side. So basically what I've done is I've said everybody who is a system admin can access all merchandise records. So one last thing that we need from Salesforce is the enterprise visual, which is used to generate the client-side stubs. And I've already downloaded that, but you can find it under the API section. So it's very similar to what you would do for developing any other kind of client application.
Let me just actually kick in there also.
Yeah.
So this is actually what we're showing you now. The Adobe Flash Builder for Force.com is what is currently available as a developer preview release, or you would also probably want to call this a beta release. So the business of actually having to download the enterprise whistle is something that in the GA release we'll probably make a little bit nicer, where you can actually just, in Flash Builder for Force.com, you can actually provide your username, password, the instance that you want to log on to, and it's going to be a little bit more seamless. Just wanted to point that out here.
Yeah.
But so there's Flash Builder, right? So show us what you got.
Okay. So I'm going to go create a new project. And you'll notice that I can select a Stratus project, which will generate a lot of the boilerplate code required. So I'm just going to walk through the wizard, call it DF demo, and I'm going to select the rest of the defaults. And the next thing it's going to ask me for is the enterprise visual file. By the way, how many out here have used the open source toolkit that we already have? Oh, quite a few of you. So one of the things, I mean, if you remember with the toolkit is, it uses the partner API to talk to that, so you have access to generic objects. Whereas with this Flash Builder for Force Flash Builder, this new product, the Stratus product, it actually parses the enterprise visual. So I'm going to select the one that I already downloaded.
Now you know why we call it Stratus. It just rolls a little easier off the
It's
tongue.
a little bit easier on the tongue. So what it's doing right now is it is going through your visual file. It is introspecting it, and for every custom and standard object you have out there, it is creating the client-side representation. So which is done, and you can see that I've got all my data types out here, including the merchandise object. So the benefit of this is now you can not only get static compile time checking of your types, but you can also use the cool code completion and other things that Flash Builder brings to the table. So this is really nice. So what it has done is it's created a whole bunch of files, and the first file I'm going to open is this thing called DF demo, and you'll notice that the root element is something called Stratus application. This is your main container for your application, and this is where you configure a lot of the other properties. I mean, I can configure the timeout. I mean, the synchronization interval. I can even put a default username, password if I'm doing any testing out here and so forth. And the one thing that we do need to change is the required types. Right now, it is pointing to account and contact. This is what is in our briefcase. In our briefcase, we put in merchandise records out there, not account and contact. So I'm going to change this to merchandise. And I can also change the name of the application. I'll call it inventory tracker. Save this file. Now, in fact, what happens right now is I'm going to, I haven't really built in any application functionality, but I can actually go ahead and run this application as it is. And you'll notice some of the built-in thing that comes as part of the framework. So you'll notice that I didn't really have a login screen. The login screen was part of the framework. I can actually log in. Oops. Let me just log in real quick. There's nothing that we'll see now, but don't do this. So it is actually using, and you'll notice that the message went real well. It's fetching. What happens now is the local database also gets populated with this. I mean, the synchronization also happens when the application gets initialized. So you'll see that the application is empty right now. We're going to go put the code in there. But I want to give you.
Before we do this, actually, let me make this point a little bit more clear.
Yeah.
So when Nick actually launched his application, without writing a single line of code, the only thing that he did was actually change the required types, right? Because when you create an empty Stratus project, it comes with account and contact, which are two of the most basic objects that we have in Salesforce. So that's what we put in there when we create the empty container. So we changed it. We said, okay, we don't want to deal with account and contact. We don't want to deal with merchandise. And here at the Run button, you got the login screen. Obviously, that comes for free. You didn't have to do that, or Nick, you didn't have to do that. But then actually, when you're authenticated, we actually reach out to Salesforce.com. We introspect your metadata again. We actually take your schema definition from Salesforce.com and create a local representation of that in the underlying SQLite database of Adobe AIR. And then we actually reach out, configure the synchronization logic, and also sync all the data that we find based on that briefcase definition into that database. And eventually you will end up on this screen here, which is kind of a hello world screen. So you see, what does it say? Unfortunately, I'm short-sighted. It says your application here or your features here. Yeah. So you're actually all bootstrapped. The plumbing is all done. You can actually start putting features and fields into your application, but you don't really have to worry about an offline data store, about synchronization. You see that you get a little icon there on the bottom left, which gives you the connectivity status. So you know you're connected. It would actually turn when we synchronize every 20 minutes. And there's actually some more stuff to come, but I'll actually let Nick continue with this.
Yeah, that's a really
demo.
good point. I mean, thanks, Marcus, for pointing this out. This is on the standard component that comes with the framework called a status bar, and we'll look at how you can use that in your code. So this is the main application container. All the other code that was generated out here is called main window, and it's really got a skeletal structure out here. We need to fill it in. And you can go into the design view, and you'll get the design palette, and you can, just like you would with the Flash Builder, I got empty out here. I can actually come in here. I can drag and drop things, just like what you would do. Mostly Flex people, they build in the UI components, then do the data binding. So you can do all those things out here as well. So I'm going to switch back to the source view, and the other thing I'm going to do is to copy a snippet of code and paste over this. So really logically out here, let me expand this out a little bit. So logically here that you can think about it as having two pieces of the code here. One is all the UI controls that you need. The other is the action script code that uses the underlying functionality to do the data binding. So the UI code is very straightforward. We got a data grid to display all the records, and a box at the top to allow you to edit a selected record. And the one that I want to point your attention to is this Stratus components out here, especially the label and field. The label and field is very similar to the input field that you have in Visualforce. What it does is it understands the metadata behind the input field thing and brings that functionality in. If you remember when we used the UI, it had the inline editing, it had all the other GUI widgets built in. So this brings the same functionality into your code.
Why don't you fire up the application we actually show?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Those folks here what we're talking about. So I mean the proposition I guess is clear, right? I mean typically if you do Flex development and you want to make it look like Salesforce.com, you have to use the standard components that come with the Flex library or with the Flex toolkit. And you can absolutely do it. It's no problem at all. But of course, it's a little bit of work, and UI work is always a little bit tedious. So what we did is actually, when we built this new framework, we said, well, you know what? Those basic components, we throw them in there for you, and we actually, pick up all the hard work of making this look and feel like Salesforce.com. And so now that we actually launched this inventory tracker, what you will see is that there's a bunch of fields, and you see the code in the background is basically, 6 lines of code where we basically just say, okay, we want to use a Stratus label and field, and then we bind it to something that we saw in the data service. And then what you see at the top here is the 6 fields. And now as Nick actually moves over them, you see if it's a pick list, then we actually show you a pick list. Right? And if, for example, it's a checkbox, then we render a checkbox. If it's, what else do we have here? If it's a number field, we put the currency sign in front and all those good things. And actually that comes also completely for free. All you need to do is write a single line of code, bind it to the right object, and we at runtime introspect the metadata for this particular field and then render the right field type. So that's actually something that would take, I don't know how many lines of code if you don't have Stratus and you don't use our framework.
Yeah. So that's really how the application looks like. Let me, before we show some of the other functionality, let me highlight a few things in the code out here. Looking at the action script piece out here. So, I've got a few import statements, just like to get the classes that I need. One of the main, this thing out here is this object called Stratus Wrapper, which is of type Stratus Wrapper type. And this is your main handle to your Stratus functionality. It interacts with the data management service that Marcus talked about in the architecture slides. And so if you have used the toolkit, as some of you have done, it's not quite like the connection object. The connection object was really a simple handle to the web service operation, whereas this is a lot smarter than that. It talks to the data management service, so the difference between online and offline is something that you don't have to actively manage. And you call all your methods on this particular object out there. And the first thing I'm doing out here is calling the query method, and the calling pattern is an async pattern, so I need to have a pair of function handlers, callback handlers, to handle the result of the query. But you'll notice that I'm doing a select star, and the query is actually going against the local database. So it's not going against your force.com thing, it's going against the local database and pulling up the record. And so there's a SQLite database which is included with the AIR runtime, so it is hitting against that. And the result is handled by this callback handler called query result handler, where I'm just taking the results and assigning it to the data provider for the grid. The other methods work in the same way, the same method and so forth. So the code, as you can see, is just like a page long. Not a lot of code that you have to write, but you get a lot of built-in functionality into that. What I wanted to show next, before I think Marcus wants to pull the plug to show you how the offline thing works. But before he does that, I want to show you how conflict management works, or how what happens if you have some records downloaded out here and somebody goes and changes a record out there on the force.com side. So let's take a look at that. So I'm back in my Salesforce UI. I'm going to go to this particular record, and I'm going to change the inventory to something else and save this. Now I'm going to run this application again. So by the way, one of the nice things is you can do a default username and password, as I said, in the application properties, which is great when you're testing, doing this kind of iterative testing. Okay, so if I go back to the same record, you'll see that the inventory has been changed here, and I can update this field, or I can update any of the field I want. I mean, it's really the level of granularity is a record. So let's say I do something else, and try to save the record. Oh.
It shouldn't actually cause a conflict, right? Because you launched the application. Right? So the typical use case would be, let's say you use this inventory tracker, and you're out there in the inventory in the warehouse, and you're actually trying to track downloads. So how many of whatever do I have? And someone else actually goes into Salesforce.com. Let's say your boss also went into the aisle 15 and said, oh yeah, I know it's only 15, but now you actually try to do the same thing while you're being disconnected, and then you sync back up to the server. Both you and your boss actually change the same record. Right. And of course, sometimes it's easy to resolve those conflicts. You would say, the record that got actually changed at the later time would win, so the newer record would win. But for those occasions where we cannot actually find out the obvious resolution, we actually have a conflict resolution.
Yeah. Actually, I know what is happening here. Let me show that it's a good kind of unplanned thing. But the reason I didn't do at that time is I had two active briefline configurations. So, and it was, I think, pulling up the old one. So let me make this inactive, save this. Now, do the same thing again. And go back.
That was you as your boss. And now it's you back in aisle 15.
Yeah, okay.
Changing the same record.
You see the sync failed because I had two briefline configurations there. That's what caused the thing. So basically, what it's saying is, there is a conflict there, and there are different ways to handle a conflict like this. And what we provide you is out of the box a way to resolve this manually out here. So I can say resolve it, it tells me what the value in the database is, what the value in the local database is, and I can select one of them. I can just say, well, select the one from the client because I know what is happening out here in the warehouse. Continue to summary, and hit finish out here. So now it goes back and takes the one in the client and puts it back there. So again, this is the code that I didn't have to build. The conflict resolution thing, the UI, even the UI was actually part of the framework. And if you don't like it, I mean, there are different events that you can monitor for and build your own conflict resolution mechanism out there. So,
all right, Nick, thank you very much. I think it's time to pull the plug. And
okay.
We actually mean, hang on. The big punchline is yet to come. So, Nick, why don't you pull the plug? You're talking about...
Actually, Marcus,
no,
please do the honors.
You do the honors. You're talking about offline applications. Let's see what this offline application can actually do. So,
the plug is pulled.
See, here it is. And watch what the application does. You see that our little icon on the far left there should turn from green into a gray. So it's one of the great things that basically come with Adobe AIR. It'll actually detect that we're disconnected from the network. Did it actually log? Is it still green?
Still green. I think it takes about...
maybe it's your wireless network?
No.
There you go. So automatically we detected actually
Right.
that we were disconnected from the internet. And so now let's say we wanted to plug in again.
Actually, I think I want to show one more thing. Actually, I can, as a user, I can continue to work with this application. And that's really the real power of this whole thing is, I can make changes back here, save it.
So we're back in aisle 15 now, right? We just lost network connection.
Yeah, we lost it there, but I can continue working on this application. I mean, the user doesn't see doesn't experience the outage because of the lack of the network. And I can go back and...
all right, now we're...
okay, there we go.
We plug in again. And so what you should see is that we automatically detect that we're connected again. So the sync icon will turn green again. And also what we do is, based on the fact that we're now back connected, we will actually say, oh, great, we're connected, and we have actually changes that the user made. Let's do a sync cycle to the server and make sure that everything is current again. Let's see. Let's give it a... This is always
takes about 10 seconds.
This is always the scary part of doing live presentations. But, we'll see. Hopefully it'll come up. If I had a snare with me, I would do a little drum roll for you. Usually it's a little bit faster than that. I think we are pulling the network status every...
Right.
There we go.
There we go.
So it actually detected... thank you.
Thank you.
And so you can obviously see where this is going. If you are, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the current offline client, Force.com Connect Offline. Or actually quite a few. So if you look at that client, it was actually a truly disconnected client, right? In the sense that even if you have connectivity on your laptop, it would actually still always pull against the local store. And the only way how you could actually get that synchronized is click a button that said synchronized briefcase. Here, with this new platform, we can obviously build much more interactive and much smarter applications. And Adobe allows us to basically, act on things like we regained internet connectivity, we missed internet connectivity. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff you can build on this technology.
So, Marcus, do we have time to show the events, the toaster event and things like that, or are we running out of time?
I think we're running a little bit out of time. I think I need to finish up the slide deck if you actually switch back to here.
Sure.
I seem to be a little bit technically challenged today. So there's only actually a few more slides. Business and end user benefits. So obviously with Adobe and this new technology, you can build highly interactive and expressive UIs. Improve decision-making support. So obviously, if you can present the information easier, that's a given. Powerful desktop integration. We talked about this and we demoed it. But things that you can also build is, that's basically standard Adobe stuff. Drag and drop, and just very rich UIs. Transparent support for offline and online. That's basically what we just demoed. Ideally, we want you to build applications where the user doesn't really even care whether he or she is online or offline. It just basically should just work. One of the biggest wins for us, especially here in the United States, I'm not sure how many users are here that are using Mac and not PCs. Or actually, 5 years ago, this would have been like no hands at all. So one of the biggest things that we embrace is making all this available cross-platform. So whatever application you built in this new framework will run on Mac, on Windows, and also on Linux. Seamless application updates. If you've ever actually installed an AIR application, it's extremely easy from a developer's perspective as well as from the end user's perspective to get the latest version of that. In essence, from a developer's perspective, you just put it on a public update page, and then every time a user would start the AIR application, it would ping home and see if there's a new application update, and then prompt the user whether or not he or she wants to install it. So very seamless. It's very easy to keep the applications that are running on a user's desktop that you obviously don't have access to in a current state. And then faster and lower cost way of delivering apps. Again, this goes back to the message of this new framework will actually allow you to take the cloud to the desktop, or of course, if you're actually running web applications, you can build very rich cloud applications with this. But the whole proposition from an offline perspective, of course, is to take the development speed of Force.com to the desktop and build those desktop applications in record time. Before we go into the Q&A, the learn more. So tomorrow morning, we have a hands-on session. It's a bit early, but good thing that the Black Rose concert was actually yesterday. So tomorrow morning, you're going to be all very relaxed, and you can show up bright and early at 9 o'clock if you like. There's actually a session called a hands-on session combining Force.com with the Adobe Flash platform. And we will actually, in 45 minutes, walk you through how easy it is to build something very similar to this inventory tracker that Nick showed to us. So you will actually get your hands onto the product. Another great thing, and I already talked about it, and now meanwhile I know it's this way, is the Stratus Cafe, sponsored by Adobe. So James is actually going to be there. I'm sometimes there, and a lot of great Adobe resources are there to actually also show you the product and answer your questions. And there's also actually quite a few CDs left, I think. If you don't want to go to developer.force.com/Flash Builder to download the version for Mac and for Windows, so you can just pick up one of the CDs, and then you can actually start playing around with this at home today. All right, and with that, I think we're pretty much done, and we're going to go into our QA session. So James and Nick, why don't you join me here? And if you have a question, probably the best way to go about this is if you would actually please move up to one of the microphones in the aisle, because this session gets recorded, and then whoever listens to it later on has the benefit of actually understanding what the question was. Please.
So in the AIR desktop platform that you guys showed, I noticed that it has a log-on screen. What about users who are using single sign-on?
Can you repeat that question?
So the question is about single sign-on in AIR applications. Right. So there is a way to do that. AIR doesn't have the API specifically, but in AIR 2 we can actually talk to native system calls, make native system calls, and could do it through that mechanism.
Well, actually, I will add one thing to that also. Is you saw that for the developer preview, we actually give you a standard username and password login mechanism. But actually, in the production release, what we will do is we will use OAuth, a token-based mechanism, and that will actually also address the single sign-on to some extent, because you will actually only have to log in once, given that your token may never expire.
Okay, thank you.
We are currently having no plans. The question was if we're supporting SAML. Currently, we have no plans. No, OAuth would be the only token-based mechanism that we support. Any other questions, please, over there? So I think the question was that you noticed that we consumed the Force.com web service as is, and there was no life cycle in the mix. Is that your question? So that's actually kind of goes back, and I think James can talk about this in more detail, but that goes back to we actually did not take lifecycle as exists today with the lifecycle client-server configuration. Together with Adobe, we actually changed this product a little bit.
Yeah, so we're using the client-side aspect of lifecycle data services. Yep. Find me afterwards. We'll talk more details about that. What is that, Sonia?
All right. Oh, we have
questions
quite a
at the
long
microphone.
lineup actually at the microphone. All right. First come, first served.
Is the database encrypted?
The database will be encrypted, yes.
Okay. And is it possible to work only in online mode, not in an offline mode?
Sorry, it's very hard to hear you, sir. Could you?
Is it possible to work only in online mode and not in an offline mode?
Well,
turn off caching.
Right.
Yes, sure.
I mean, well, was the question whether it's possible in online and offline mode?
No, the question is, can you turn off caching so that you don't do the local caching? Absolutely. You just use it like a web application, like the web model, rather than doing the Stratus. synchronization.
All right. The gentleman in the red shirt.
The last person here may have answered this already, but for those of us who want to use the Adobe Air to do like custom UIs for native apps like Visualforce, are we going to have a method to pass existing Salesforce users' credentials to do the auto authorization like we do with regular Visualforce pages?
You can already do that today in Visualforce with Flex. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Yeah, there's documentation online for how to do that.
All right, thank you.
All right, over there.
On the introspection side, can you pull in like validation rules as well?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
You know, on the reflection side, can you pull in validation rules?
Oh,
Validation.
We actually, so the validation rules, that's something that we currently do at synchronization time. But so you would actually not, if you want to enforce the same validation rules client side upon data entry, you would, that's actually something that you would have to do code yourself right now.
Okay.
Something that, it's a good idea, and we hear that requirement often. But I mean, currently the validation rules would be evaluated when you try to sync from the client to the server.
Okay. And one other question. So everything that you showed us, is that free or is there a charge for it?
What was the question? Can we turn that microphone up a little bit? It's very hard to hear.
Yeah.
So currently this is a beta product. As I said, a developer preview, so it's completely for free. Once we actually have the GA product, which is hopefully in the first half of next year, the only thing that you will have to purchase is a license for Adobe Flash Builder, and I think the pricing for that has not been yet announced. But the platform itself, if you will, is free other than you actually having to purchase the development tool.
Yeah, so Flash Builder pricing has not been announced yet for Flash Builder 4. It is per developer seat pricing. The current pricing for Flex Builder 3 starts at $299 per developer seat.
In the future, do you guys see this replacing the current offline connect using the Flex platform?
Very good question. So yes, I mean, one of the reasons why we obviously wanted to build this platform together with Adobe was, besides all the cool user or let's say use cases with an online application and doing rich CRM customizations, was of course so that we can actually take full advantage of the capabilities of the AIR platform also. So yeah, over time what you will see is that we will actually rewrite our offline application on this platform. If you want to have more details on that, though, it'll go into a slightly different direction. So I think we'll see how that trickles down. But yeah, offline is going to get a lot of attention this year at Salesforce.com.
Hey guys, so it was great to see how easy it is to consume the enterprise WSDL, go through the S objects that we create. Is there any way that we can consume custom WSDLs and interact with our own custom, basically hunts of memory?
I guess
interact with. I'm sorry, I didn't hear all that.
Sorry, so custom web services that we build in Apex. Is there any way that we can consume those WSDLs?
You can consume any web service you want from Flex.
Okay.
Yep,
Right.
whatever you want.
I think, I mean, it's also fair to say that, I mean, the lifecycle component that we use, actually, I mean, we built a data service adapter for Force.com that you can actually use for free. And in conjunction with Force.com, you can also use Lifecycle for free, which is usually a commercial product. If you wanted to use it against something else, you can actually purchase additional licenses from Adobe and then actually client-side integrate with whatever data source you want.
Okay.
All right, over here.
iPhone compatibility?
What was that?
iPhone compatibility for all this?
We showed a month or so ago the ability to take an AIR application and cross-compile that into a native iPhone application. So that's something we're currently developing. There's some information on Adobe's website about that.
Any idea about timing on that?
No idea.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
We showed it working, so yep. But we haven't shipped anything yet. You have to step up to the mic. Next question.
So Chatter's a messaging framework that I think would lend itself to some really neat AIR applications. Is there a roadmap to bring that messaging framework or push technology into AIR?
Push technology is definitely something that we would like to look into. So yeah, you will actually see some things around that. I mean, obviously, you know, if you follow the announcement of yesterday with Chatter, one of the first things that we will actually build is also a desktop application for the Chatter application. And if you think about the primary use cases, if you are subscribing to, let's say, an opportunity feed as a sales manager or as a sales rep, and you know, get those tweets basically from your opportunity, those we actually want to deliver, you know, in real time as server push. It's a feature that I think we internally currently call live updates, but I think it's not scheduled until late or later next year. But so that's actually a technology that we want to look into, obviously, for the desktop. It enables all different sorts of cool use cases.
Okay, last question.
For those of us that got used to rolling a lot of our own HTML and we're concerned with accessibility for screen readers and stuff like that,
yep.
How does developing something on this platform work for people with those kind of
so Flash Player and Flex are accessible today in the browser. Air 2 will support accessibility. So currently in production is Air 1.5. Air 2, the next major version that will ship sometime, I think, first half of next year. We have betas out currently for Air 2 that will support accessibility on the desktop as well. Cool.
All right, I think that's very much it.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thanks.